The Centre presents a new podcast, CBME and You, a podcast devoted to promoting awareness and debate around controversial ethical issues in biomedicine.
Welcome to episode 6, season 2 of CBME and You. Today we discuss the moral machine. Is ethics really just mob rule? Can we solve ethics by just asking millions of people what they think is right? And should an automated car get to decide who lives and who dies? Today, we welcome Dr. Edmond Awad from the Uehiro Oxford Institute and the Wellcome, with 2 L's, Centre for Ethics and Humanities at Oxford University to talk about morals and machines and moral machines. Welcome, Edmond.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so our very first question to get to know you a little bit better, copy or coffee?
Yeah, I did try. I think what I thought is copy. It was from Yakun Kaya toast.
Yakun Kaya toast.
It was just given to me by default, and I think it tastes. It tastes sweet, and I like sweet. I'm not sure if I will be wanting to have a sweet my everyday drink, but I liked it as a delicacy, something that I would have every now and then.
And would you prefer it over like a flat white or an espresso or filter coffee?
Yes, I would prefer it over these things.
Really?
I would probably prefer like a black coffee over it for every day.
We'll have to get you to try a Copio. So it's coffee without any milk.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We'll do that after.
Okay.
Excellent.
It's not very sweet, though.
Well, because the beans are roasted with sugar and butter, and then they might still put more sugar in it unless you ask for it. Sudai? Is Sudai without?
Sudai is less sugar.
Kosong is no sugar.
Did you say kosong?
Yeah. What
It
is
sounded
it?
to me like you said croissant.
So for listeners, I bet James that he couldn't sneak the word croissant in today's episode, or I would have to buy him lunch, and we didn't even make it 3 minutes before it left.
Yeah, too easy.
Anyway, moving on. Which country would you like to travel to next?
I think Japan.
You've got to be like number 4 or number 5. Why Japan?
I don't know. I mean, I like 5 years ago, I had a trip that was almost, I almost made it to Japan, and I had a presentation to give there. It was all paid for, all prepared, and everything was going in the right direction. And then this was supposed to be like end of February 2020. And then at the beginning of February, I remember we received like an email saying that the travel, like we had like some kind of risk assessment, saying like this travel assessment to, is now expanded to seven countries, and you have to discuss with your head of department about this. And at the time, of course, it was for me like, it's not going to be a problem. But then, my head of department was like, I don't want you to go and maybe get stuck there. You're teaching now, so it's going to be a problem. And I thought that was completely unacceptable. Like, how dare she could say that to me? And I had to write a very apologetic email to these very nice people who have done a lot of preparation for me to so I had to cancel that. So it's still in my heart that I still want to make it.
I think after everything that went down, they kind of got it.
Yeah.
I think you might have been wrong on this one.
Yeah, later I felt like at least I don't have to worry about that part.
So it sounds like Japan is your long lost love.
Yes, to some degree.
Star-crossed lovers.
Yes.
Excellent. Last question. What song would you sing at karaoke?
I think my favorite karaoke song is Sway, Michael Bublé version. And I think it's just because it doesn't require you to go like a very high pitch in your song. So, and I have like a voice that is closer to, it's mostly baritone, but maybe closer to bass or bass. I don't know.
He knows his range.
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to pretend. We'll see how my voice is actually being picked up on this mic. It's a mic problem, not my voice.
It has nothing to do with my voice.
On the playback, you're going to sound like, well, when the dance with me.
Oh, is that song?
Yes, I think so, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So I'm in the same boat as you. I prefer karaoke songs that are at a lower range, namely because James can sing higher than me. And so the point of being having a feminine voice in the karaoke room is completely mitigated when James is there. It's like, why do I even go?
Yeah.
So you're a tenor.
Well, I'm actually like a bass or baritone. It's just when I got a pretty decent falsetto, I think. I like to think.
Yeah.
No, this was gonna be picked up as like, yes, my voice is.
Like, you're a tenor? Oh, what? No. I have a low, deep voice. All right. Now I think we need to get to some serious questions and make our money. Okay, so you're pretty well known for this thing called the moral machine. And obviously this sounds like a technical phrase, and I think a lot of people might not have heard about the moral machine. Sorry. So can you tell us a little bit more about the moral machine, like what it is, what it's used for, and what we can learn from it?
Yeah, thank you for asking me about it. And I think, I don't know how famous it is. I think Moral Machine is a website that you can find it on moralmachine.net. That website generates random moral dilemmas that are basically modeled after the trolley problem. And in those moral dilemmas that are faced by driverless cars. So, it shows you scenarios that are binary choice, asks you, what do you think the car should do in this? What do you think the automated vehicles do or self-driving cars do in these situations? And basically the car is, the brake fails and the car is about to kill one group of people. And then the only way out is if it does something and swerves out of its way, which means sacrificing another group of people. And then the website, each scenario will vary different things. Sometimes the car has some annoying athletes running in front of it.
Annoying.
Very annoying, which you feel like maybe that's what you should do. Other times, you might see like, it might be having like a pregnant woman who's like, passing by, and you feel like that's probably about more than one person, so maybe it shouldn't do that. And then basically, so you go like through this like 13 scenarios, and at the end of it, you get a summary of your answers. And this is kind of a gamified aspect of it. So in a way, you could consider it as an online serious game, or just like an experiment or scientific study that has some kind of gamification elements. In basically generating those random dilemmas, we've kind of created this as like let's say like a psychology experiment where you vary several factors, like the gender of those potential casualties, whether they are pedestrians or passengers, whether they are fit or not fit, whether they are like doctors or executives or like a homeless person. So it's kind of try to understand how any of these factors could, change people's answers.
Yeah, great. So I'm a big enjoyer of trolley problems myself, and I know that part of what makes them so appealing, at least for philosophers, I don't know about anybody else, is that you can vary all these you can change all these little variables and almost treat it like a scientific experiment. You have the same setup, but you change a little variable here, for example, as you say, instead of letting this person die, you're actively killing them. And it can sometimes change the answers that you give, right? So I'm interested to hear a bit more on like what variables you think are the most interesting. When you change them, what makes the biggest impact on what answers people give?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we basically varied 9 different factors. Mm-hmm. And one of those, I think maybe I'll just walk you through those 9 factors. And one of them is as I mentioned, that whether the car should stay or swerve. So for us, like this is like a capturing something like omission versus commission, killing versus letting die. Another factor is whether they're pedestrians or passengers, which is also something that was part of the debate as well, like whether the car should have a loyalty to their passengers. But on the other hand, you might say, well, pedestrians are here externalities. These are people probably did not opt into being part of this whole thing. So why should they be paying the price? And And the legality aspect, like, we thought that maybe if people were crossing legally or illegally might actually impact people's answer. And then the other factors were more related to some features about the potential casualties, like, as I said, like their gender, their age level, the fitness level, social status, or we call it social value, I think. Was it social value? Yeah, something like how much people think that they contribute to society. And then the number of lives as well, which is kind of trying to get into the utilitarianism aspect of it, and also humans versus pets as well. And what we found is actually there are three things that people have kind of approved of more than others, which is the first one is that people prefer or like have approve of the car sparing human lives over pet lives, sparing more lives over fewer lives, and sparing younger lives over older lives.
I'm really intrigued by the way that you included certain demographics about people that we might have good reason to not include in automated driving, or that might be actually illegal to consider, such as gender discrimination or age discrimination. Were you more looking for a discovery to see whether or not people have these preferences? Did you have any worries about what you might find? Do you think it's justifiable to include those sorts of discriminatory preferences?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is quite controversial to include these things, and I think maybe part of the controversy is also maybe our communication about the purpose of this website was not very clear, and a lot of the media basically picked it up and decided to put their own understanding of it. So there were some headlines saying MIT is crowdsourcing the ethics of driverless cars, and in a way, it seemed like this is what's going to happen. This is how cars will be developed with these things. Of course, from our side, we were. This was like a psychology study for us, right? So I think it's an important thing to do a distinction here. And I'm sure your audience probably are familiar with this distinction, which is the descriptive ethics versus normative ethics. And normative ethics is more about what should be done and what ought to be done, while descriptive ethics is more what most people think we should do, or what our culture tells us to do, or what people behave in daily life. And this is the part that we're trying to capture in the website. So including those factors, we were more on the side of these factors we know from other psychology literature that they have influenced people's decisions about these things. So how much do they actually influence the decision in this situation?
And how many preferences did you identify? It was in the millions, wasn't it?
Yeah. So to our happy surprise, we had over millions of participants, and we had about 40 million dilemmas answered in the first 18 months. Now we've crossed the 100 million because the website is still around. Thank you. It was. I think we did not really anticipate any of that a priori. We thought, it was, maybe some people will find it interesting. Maybe the nerds and the geeks will probably talk about it, and that's it. But we didn't really, yeah.
Well, I put that link in a course description that I once did, so you're welcome.
Oh, thank you.
But the real question I wanted to ask was
all your class, huh?
Yeah, what, all 4 students?
Yeah, I don't know how many people actually clicked on it. Probably not that many. So you mentioned earlier that that some people took it very seriously, and some people were kind of just were more in it for fun. Did you have a way of differentiating between people who are doing this in the way that, as a serious kind of experiment, like the way philosophers treat many trolley problems, or versus people who are just going in to just click about and because they're bored because it's COVID or something like that?
Yeah, the short answer is we don't have any way to. But I think we think more about it. I guess the closer comparison is how does it compare to other psychology studies that ask about the trolley problem, and in that regard, yes, I think psychologists would prefer to be like more thorough, like try to provide a more elaborate description, make sure that sometimes they ask the same questions in many different ways because they know that framing could have an impact. And it is possible that the way our visuals were kind of like done in a specific way might have pushed people in one way or another. The fact that the website went viral and made it into some of the darkest corners of the internet, that also means that we might have got some like very weird sample, not as an acronym weird, but like just weird. And we, and it's true. I mean, we did have like a substantial, let's say, percentage of people who just wanted to save pets over humans. I don't know if this was like basically, people who are serious about it, or people just want to troll. Like we had maybe 20% or something
oh wow,
who had this kind of save the pets and kill the humans. So yes, in a way, we wouldn't be able to know in this case. There were some other issues, of course, like when you ask people what you think the car should do, are you asking them whether they think what they think the right thing is, or what they would themselves actually prefer for it to do? So we have all of these issues. And of course, to deal with these issues, you would have to be more like provide a richer way to capture this data. But I think this is kind of the trade-off right here. So this is what this could capture. The reason it could go viral is because we had to be people have a very short attention span. So we had to be like a very visual, like a least amount of text, no, let's say no account registration and all of these things, which would have been nice for us to capture returning users. We had to capture them another way, which is not as reliable. So yeah, it has all of this, of course it has some methodological problems, but it also allows us to get into many different countries. So it allows us to do this comparison across countries. And I'm not saying that's also completely out of any problems, right? But that's kind of the trade-off. Like if you want to go like a little bit outside and get into outside, like a bigger sample, cross country, outside the Western world, then you have to lose something else. And in this case, we had to lose this kind of richer way of asking those questions.
Did you find differences in cultures between preferences? Because you said you looked at 9 different demographics altogether, 3 of which were age, saving people over pets, and
number of people. So that they were fairly common. Were there any nuances between like the East and the West, or various regions within each? Yeah. So that was kind of a very interesting part of the paper that we did after, is that basically we were able to, because we had a sheer amount of data from many countries, is that we were able to do a lot of interesting stuff, like, for example, calculating those 9 different preferences per each of those countries. And we had like for about, I forgot how many countries, but like maybe over probably 130 countries, we had like about 100 participants at least from. So for those ones, we calculated those 9 preferences. And then now we have like a vector of 9 dimensions for each of those countries, allows us to calculate distance between countries. And then there's some kind of clustering technique that allows you to do this hierarchical clustering. That does not only allow you to see like 3 big clusters, which we saw, like 3 big clusters, but also it could show you for every country what is the closest country as well. So you could see like, I should probably have looked up what is the closest to Singapore before coming here. But basically these 3, so in our case, we saw these 3 big clusters. One of them, we call it Western because it has a lot of Western countries. And then one, we call it Eastern because it has several countries from Asia and from Islamic world. And then the third one, we call it Southern because it had like 2 subclusters that was, one is Latin American countries and one former French colonies. And generally speaking, I would say there was some kind of universals and variations. So in terms of the direction of preferences, so let's say if I say, okay, you want to save the younger or you want to save the older? So in most countries, you would say people would save the younger, but in some cultures, people like this difference becomes like less pronounced, right? And I think this is more like in the East Asian or societies, or in Middle East, like you would see that difference goes smaller in terms of older. Other things like females over males, that's also something that almost in every country people spared females more males. Like I guess female lives were seen as more precious, I guess, in some sense. But also there was some, that difference was like a shrank in for some different countries. one of the most peculiar things that we found is that this French subcluster, and it's like France specifically, is that they have like a stronger tendency to spare the female lives over male lives, and in that sense, they were slightly different from other European countries, for example, in the Western world, which we, in our team we had like people who are like as experts on anthropology and culture, who there was nothing specifically about this in literature that why women specifically are very highly appreciated in the French culture specifically, and other countries that were influenced by France. What else? I mean, one of the things that you would expect is seeing that people spared the young over the elderly much higher in the Western world than in the Eastern world. There's also, we could also do some kind of basically just kind of correlation analysis with other cultural indices. One of the things like individualism versus collectivism, which is individualism, countries that are individualistic focus on the individuals, and they have strong institutions. People have a loyalty to the state in general. They have like some kind of pro-sociality to strangers. While in collectivist societies, people care about, they think of themselves as part of a group. Family ties are stronger. Institutions are not as strong. Your loyalty is more to your extended family members than to the states. And one of the things we found is that in those individualist societies, people were more utilitarian, which is in a way like, if you're kind of more like an egalitarian way of thinking that people should be, I should treat strangers in the same way I treat my second cousin, then you will think that saving more lives would be more important. While if you're collectivist, maybe you will think that other factors should be playing in as well.
This is absolutely fascinating. I'm super intrigued why the French loved, what the French love the women. Yeah. Should have seen that one coming.
You're like, this is really weird. Oh, okay, I see it.
This makes sense. My next question for you is, you've garnered so many results from this. You now have public preferences. So let's just say you took these preferences, you implemented them in the driving, in the autonomous vehicles, and now these preferences that the cars have, and an accident happens and it goes the way the people want. And when I say want, I mean last option out of necessity. Does that mean that these choices now are like publicly justifiable? Is there a reason why you really wanted to do this? And is there a reason why you want to implement these millions of preferences into the way we structure and algorithmize? Ooh, is that a word? Algorithmize. Help, I'm in a loop.
Algorithmatize is what you said?
Yeah. Help.
Okay. Just first, I would just want to clarify, we did not program anything into cars based on these preferences.
I just want to put that out there. We haven't killed anyone.
But we will.
We hear you. We get you. We see. Wink, wink.
Did you wink and then right? Oh wait, this is a podcast. I need to say wink.
I did.
Disclaimer.
Wink.
No, I guess the fact that it's what the majority, or like say the public, the majority of people think that this is what it should be, does not mean that this is what we should do, right? And I think it's kind of an important thing, because it also it wasn't clear for us, like people will see it this way, and so we didn't also work on the communication about that part. But throughout the as we went on and in the project, we started realizing when we get questions about these things, people saying like, well, why can't the car stop? It's like, well, of course the car should stop. Like, if it can, but like we're talking about if the car cannot stop, right? I think maybe some people struggled with the idea of a dilemma itself, right? Like when you give them the trolley problem and say, well, why can't the trolley stop?
It's a hypothetical. Just go along with it.
So I feel like many people, when we started talking about so in 2016, which is like just around the same time where we released the website, a few months later, Germany created this committee of experts from different aspects of ethics and legality and all of these things. And those experts sat together and met several times, and there were like several disagreements and all of these things, and people did not want to sign off because they have like all this disagreement. But they came up with kind of set of things which are, I would say, completely uncontroversial, like things like we should value human lives or something like this, right? And one of these things is like, well, the car should definitely try to not sacrifice anyone if it can. I was like, and I started realizing when I put that sentence on my slides, people were like, yes, that's finally makes sense. Well, at what point did you think that I'm, we're doing this like for the sheer reason of like, oh, we're gonna somebody gonna have to die tonight.
Someone doesn't have to, but we will make sure.
Somebody's gonna have to die.
So I think it's kind of important to know that obviously if the car can do better, it should do better, right? So we're talking about moral trade-offs are there will be a situation where they're completely unavoidable, and in these situations, what should happen, right? But I guess maybe in that regards, yes. So the fact that most people did think like, okay, so I think the car should do this or should do that. Now here's what we think about it. So one way you can think of say, yes, this is the people have voted to do this, we should do that, right? And this is like a one extreme. And then you have the complete other extreme and say like, well, what do the public know, right? Like this is like, asking a group of people, what do you think this is a square? Do you think this is a circle? And then it's like, oh, the public decided this is, so we should just completely ignore what the public think. And I think, I think both of these opinions are, extreme, as the extreme says. But then what is really the role of the public in this, right? So in a way, if you tell people just, chill out, the experts are working on this. This is kind of, some people might think this is the best way to go over this. And many people would probably trust this more, saying, the experts are working on it. But I think it's also important to know what people also think, just being included, right? Everyone get a say to express what they think, right? And from a policy perspective, at least, policymakers do actually take the public's opinion in their making of their policies. And I'm not saying that means that they change completely just to cater to the public's interest, right? But they do take it into consideration in different ways. So in some situations, you might say, okay, so let's say I'm a policymaker and I'm just saying, well, the car cannot discriminate based on age, right? And that's something that, backed up by, ethics and law and all of these things. But now, let's say you do this study and you're like, well, a lot of people think the car should actually prioritize the children and the young people because they're vulnerable and, they have more lives ahead of them and all of these things. And apparently in the medical domain, there are situations where, younger lives are being, given priority, right? So what happens in that case? Maybe in the domain of driverless cars, it doesn't make sense. So in that case, then maybe we should try to communicate better why this is the case for the children case, right? Now the other case about the number of lives, you might say, well, that's something that not everyone agrees on. Even the German committee who had all those experts, they said there was a disagreement about having a statement saying that if they're programming the car to minimize the number of lives lost, may be justifiable. But the car should not be making trade-offs between lives. So in a way, they put two statements that are not completely coherent, and that's also to appease the different groups of people. They had some deontologists in the committee who would not sign off some kind of utilitarian statement like this. But let's say, in the case of policy, you have to choose something and work with, right? And in that case, you might say, well, we have a tie here, right? We have these two different ethically defensible, let's say, principles. But, we have to choose one to work with. In that case, you could use the public as a tie-breaking rule, right? To choose among the ethically acceptable choices. In the other case, as the children, I say maybe you want to communicate better. Maybe in situations where it's about, the public thinks that the higher social status should be prioritized over the lower social status. Well, in this case, you could safely ignore that. So it's kind of like a dealing with this information, not completely ignore it, but, sometimes, taking that into consideration without it being having the upper hand.
So good law is not mob rule.
Yes, exactly.
But good law is still representative law.
Yes, to some degree, right? And those policymakers are basically hired by representatives who was elected. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking about along the same lines. It does seem, though, that taking into consideration can be a bit of a slippery phrase, right? Because it doesn't specify how you should take something in consideration, either as a tiebreaker or as something that you can use to add on to your reasoning when you already agree, or something you should just like look at and be like, I've taken this into consideration. Moving on. So at least as when it comes to policy, do you think this is something that can actually make a difference? Or is it something that, people might just use to reinforce whatever they policymakers happen to already believe in? At least unless we really operationalize what taking into consideration means.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any experience in how policymakers make their decisions and how they usually take this into consideration. But my understanding is that they do have their own even, or at least maybe in the US, they have like some kind of a representative sample that they kind of run drafts by and say, okay, what do you like at this sample think? And or at least in some domain or some, and then they just look at it. And then I guess, yes, I mean, maybe there is no systematic way of looking at it. And maybe that's for the better, right? Because, things are messy and you don't want, to have them to be forced to take it in a very automatic, or maybe this is how, maybe the future could be, right, as well. In a way, I do see a value in systemizing and standardizing this process, because it means there is more maybe coherence, maybe there is more like a fairness that, in similar situations, people treat it equally. But also, it could get, I think like these kind of things could be messy as well. And there are some other factors that, sometimes like unspoken rules that should be or should not be used. So yeah, I don't know much about. I mean, I spoke too much for someone who doesn't know much about it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, like I haven't thought about this that much, but at least at face value, it seems really, really difficult to find a defensible way of operationalizing how we should take something like the opinions of the mob into account.
I mean, that's the principle of procedural fairness.
Yeah.
So, when decision makers, whether that be policymakers all the way down to the person who decides whether or not you get a license to drive, in order for their decision to be procedurally fair, they do have to take into account all the reasons for which they should make or should not make a decision, including your own preferences. And so if you can make the claim that decision maker did not take into account or did not take into consideration your preferences, which are a good reason for making a specific decision, then you can make an appeal. So we do this. It's just, on a grand scale of things, where at what point that goes from good procedural fairness to just mob rule.
It's still pretty slippery though, isn't it? Because like if the person that you're trying to like take to court can show, oh no, I definitely looked at the opinion and I thought about it, I just didn't think it was good. Then it's like,
Well, see, that shows that you've taken into consideration. Yeah. If you can show that you have reasons for which their preferences or reasons should not be listened to, well, then you have proof that you took it into consideration. Take into consideration doesn't mean copy pasting.
Yeah.
I guess if you can, if you get this, a lot of people say this, why didn't you take that into consideration? Then maybe if you have already looked into it, then maybe you already have a ready answer to it, right? If you have thought about it. I guess.
Reason-based thinking. You can introduce some Derek Parfit.
Yeah, but it's not just about driverless cars, because as you mentioned just now, many of the lessons that we learn from the moral machine, or at least the insights that the moral machine makes, is that there are certain tendencies or certain moral preferences that apply to a whole bunch of things, like in healthcare. So it might be a chance not just to think about what we should do with new technologies, but also a chance to look at existing policies on, for example, organ donation, and take a look at them and reconsider whether the young should get organs over the old, or whether we should keep the policies of making sure everybody has an equal chance of getting the organs, and many other examples like that. We don't have to wait for new technologies to be developed to see the applications of this experiment.
Right.
We can look at things that are happening right now and policies that we have now, and
right, which might have also spread through education as well, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea of assisted dying. I mean, that's a bit kind of.
What about in like let's just say there's a COVID 2.0, there's a new pandemic. The rate at which people are coming into hospital is just so high. we now have an AI technology that can prioritize and triage patients. And, traditionally there are some policies like, prioritize quality life years, which can be both age and ability discriminatory. But at the same time, it seems to be what people prefer, which is save the most number of lives. So it seems like the work you've done could already be applicable in many of these really complex medical decisions that have been being made for a really long time.
We did actually, just capitalizing on the moral machine popularity, which, we still have people coming to the website. So during COVID, we also said, okay, we want to see this ventilator dilemma. And that was the time before the vaccines were developed. So we did ask, it was not very gamified. It was more like this, very boring kind of style of asking questions about what do you think, how do you think, how do you think the vaccine should be prioritized? And they say, okay, do you think should be given, younger people should be given more priority, or you think people who have a higher chance of surviving from this, right? Or quality life and these things. And one thing we found was kind of, and we also included two things, which is random allocation, and first come first serve, and those were more, I would say, kind of deontological kind of version of it. And interestingly, we did this in we had 20 countries, but we also did national representative samples in 4 different countries: in Brazil, Japan, USA, and maybe Korea. And we found is basically there was some kind of sort of polarization. So we found that in all of those countries, the most 2 popular options is that one of them would say yes, use some factors to prioritize. Yes, the younger should have more. Yes, the one who's going to survive have more. Yes, the one who, I don't know if there was a gender one, female over male. I just have to remember. But yeah, quality of life, it should be prioritized. And then you have a complete opposite group, which said that these 2 of, random or best first come first serve should be the one that is most. So out of all the possible combinations, because there could be a lot of different combinations of this by people saying okay, only if it's a prognosis situation, you can so we have this kind of real polarization. And then our next question saying, okay, so, at the country level, even at any country's level, you're going to have a problem if you're going to put, something like that. And so then we ask people, basically we try to look in our data, what is the thing that is least hated in these things? And it seems like prognosis was the thing that people say, okay, if you're going to prioritize people based on this likelihood of, survival from these things, I guess that's kind of okay, right? So, so some of these other factors, the moral machine factors did play in this case, but somehow it wasn't just cultural; it was more a country level.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think over COVID, at least, there are ways in which you could see people's moral preferences change. At the beginning, a lot of people were saying, "Oh no, we should try to go for a COVID zero type policy, ensure that as we save as many lives as possible." But 1.5 years in, people are like, you know what? It's a risk worth taking. I just want to get out of the house. So I guess my question is if you were to run the moral machine or something like that again, are there any new variables that you'd want to include in this new experiment?
Right, because you're thinking about it in terms of okay, contribution or social contribution in that sense.
Yeah, or just given between COVID and new technology and AI and all that, do you think there are any new moral, considerations that are worth trying to fit into an experiment and see what people might think about them?
Yeah, I'm thinking that one of the things that I was really surprised became something that is debatable is vaccines, right? COVID vaccines specifically, right? And this is also a debate that is politicized in the US, right? And, at the time, what we knew at the time, right, it seems this is the best strategy because of this group, this social effect, right? So, and people who studied epidemiology understand that this case of COVID is not a case of car crash, right? car crash do not spread to other car crash. I mean, they do spread maybe very locally, specifically in that very moment, but they don't really spread around like in the same way that COVID does. So, like doing a policy. I mean, even the policy before the vaccine was like limiting people's freedom of going out, which a lot of people were also like completely outraged by. It's like saying my individual freedom now. I'm being forced to stay at home. I'm being forced to wash my hands after going to the toilet. I mean, what's these crazy things? I'm being forced to go and take this vaccine, which have some side effects, so which is kind of it does relate to like omission versus commission, like in a way, like if you don't take the vaccine, maybe nothing will happen to you, but your grandma might not really survive, right? But if you do take it, well, hey, something bad could happen to you and your grandma. So it's kind of, and if you don't take it, something could happen to you as well, right? So I think like this is like some topic that is not easy to understand because you have to understand epidemiology, you have to understand spread. People would not understand that if 10 people were infected today, it means 100 people could be infected tomorrow, and it means like 1,000 people the day after. So this thing, we're not cognitively, we're not really, we did not evolve to think in this kind of at this kind of level of scale. So it's not immediately think to see it this way. So I guess to this question, I would probably think more about like this kind of how to understand like things that are, let's say. That are simple ideas that versus complex things that could complex systems like in the case of COVID. I feel like I didn't really communicate this very well, but
maybe there's a possible experiment somewhere that you can ask people. Like imagine you're in a lockdown, but let's say we change one policy at a time. You can now go to the bars instead of not going to the bars. But if we do that, on average, maybe an extra 1,000 people will die.
Yeah.
What do you think should be done here? Or something like that.
I like that. And I think this also I think it has also this educational aspect to it as well, because I think people need to see, we need more tools that could actually allow people to play and see how things change, right? Like some sort of like a simulation saying like, okay, here are the policies. You can decide which policy should be done in COVID. And then it gives you the number of people who will die out of this, out of each of these policies. Like, yes, you can restrict more people, but this is how much difference it would make, right? And when people realize that, actually, for some reason, it is making big difference, right?
I find that really fascinating. I think because everyone's so willing to judge and to say what they think would be the right case, and then you hand them the consequences of their decision, particularly at the universal scale, and maybe they might not be so quick to judge next time.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. Do you have any exciting news or any more websites coming out that James and I can waste an afternoon gamifying moral philosophy?
Thank you for asking me this question. We actually do have a website that is modeled like a similar style of the moral machine. It's called Tinker Tots. And it's basically about the embryo selection and based on polygenic screening. So the idea is that, you imagine that, you're a couple who are having some kind of IVF, you have several embryos, and you need to choose which ones you want to implant. And now some companies companies initially offered doing some kind of testing, like genetic testing for some of these conditions. But now it seems like the selection has moved into polygenic screening, which includes several things that is not just medical conditions, but also some non-medical traits. And, it hasn't expanded too much so far. I mean, these are mostly in the US as well. But in this case, we kind of try to explore, how much it would impact people's decisions to know that, okay, you have this embryo that could have above average chances of having a low IQ. This one has above average chances of having an antisocial behavior. And like, which one would you choose to implant? So you would, if you go on tinker-tots.net, then you can see the websites should be going live in an hour from now, actually.
Oh, perfect.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. Looks like we'll be able to do that this afternoon. Also,
I'll be doing my real job.
This is our job. All right, we'll add the link to the podcast description. So thank you for that. Congratulations on a new website, and hopefully you get 100 million more preferences.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll take you out for some coffee.
Yes, please.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for listening to our new podcast. Subscribe online and tune in every first of the month. In the meantime, listen to CBME and You and be savvy.